tonight's topic. I'm going to do my best. I'm not a natural born teacher. I think God's given me a lot of grace for it, but there's still times where I'm like, dang, this is going to be tough. So what I'm going to go over tonight is philosophy and human nature, which sounds like a huge, deep topic, but I'm going to just really try and condense it down. Really kind of the two avenues, and we're going to use a lot of your tour of the Summa in 50 pages for a lot of this, and then just a little bit, I'm going to condense it, but I'll have you guys read a little bit of that, just kind of supplement tonight's topic, so I'll give you guys those pages. But really what I want to do tonight, the two end goals are to talk about the power of reason and our great Catholic principle of grace builds on nature, right? And so one of the things that I want to just really emphasize with our human nature is the beauty and goodness of it. Like, God gave us a body, all of our faculties, everything to ultimately lead to Him. And so when we understand human nature, and especially as we're working with people, right? People just suck sometimes, I'll be honest, right? Like, it's hard dealing with people. I know when I deal with myself, it's like, gosh, horrible sometimes. Right, but like, as I come to understand the goodness of the human nature and what God has given us, and that everything is in order, right? Like, there's an order to things. God, in the very beginning of Scripture, right, He brings order to the darkness, to the chaos. And so even with our human bodies, our passions, our emotions, like all these things, is a great gift that God has given us. And as we're leaders and working with people, it's really important to understand how this all comes together and how it can help lead to the spiritual life. Right, if you're talking with your friend and they're like, yeah, like, you know, I'm really interested in this girl, but I'm not really sure what to do. Like, yeah, like, I want you guys to have the tools to help be like a light to them, or just help be a voice of reason. And so what I'm going to start out with is Thomas Aquinas, and this isn't in the Summa 50 page, but that's my supplemental reading, is that he says each species is perfected by the way that it uses their species' power. So for the human being, our species' power as human beings is reason. So we are perfected in the depths to which we use reason, right? And so, so as we begin talking about philosophy, so philosophy means the love of wisdom, and it regards natural knowledge through the use of reason alone. So there's different truths that we can know just by reasoning to them, right? Like, I can say, I shouldn't go jump off the top of the slide because I'm going to get injured, right? I don't need God to reveal to me that that's a stupid idea. Like, I can just know that that's probably not going to end well for me, right? Some people might disagree, and I would say they might not be using right reason, but we have the capacity to reason, come to know and understand things. And Thomas Aquinas says that we are given the gift and the ability to know things, but we're kind of like a computer with a hard drive. But when we're born, our hard drive is blank, right? Like, we don't have data on it. We don't just, we have to come to learn and know things. Now, we're naturally wired for truth, but that doesn't mean that we have just what I would say infused knowledge. We have potential knowledge. We always have the potential to learn things, right? We're sitting here in this class, learning things that will help you as you move forward in life. Right, so you're gaining a knowledge in a way that beforehand was potential knowledge, but now you actually know it. So it's actual knowledge for you guys. So philosophy is that study that regards natural knowledge through the use of reason alone, and theology means the study of God, and it regards spiritual knowledge given to us as revealed by God. Right, so a lot of contemporary philosophers are going to say that philosophy and theology are not compatible, right? Like, oh, the body, the science, like science contradicts faith and all that stuff. Like, that's baloney. Philosophy actually guides and leads us to theology, right? By using our reason, we can actually come to know that there's a God. We might not be able to know all the characteristics of Him, but philosophy guides us to the capacity that we can reason that there was a creator. Now, something as far as like, there's a Trinity, like God is a Trinity, that's a revealed truth. Or that the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ is present in the Eucharist. That's something that God reveals to us and is known by theology. But certain things we can learn just through reason alone. So for example, that God exists, we can know through reason alone, and we'll go over those kind of 5 attributes for the proof of God's existence. God is one, right? We're not, we can reason to the fact that there's one God. There's not multiple gods, that we're all part of creation. Like, there was one God. We can reason to that fact. Humans have immortal souls. We can reason to that capacity as well. And then, like, examples like do not steal, right? Like, we can reason to morality in certain components. And so, so those are, like, philosophical truths that Thomas Aquinas says that a person using right reason can come to know. So I'm sure you've probably met plenty of people who have not been using the right reason. I don't know if you guys encounter those people. They're really frustrating to have conversations with. Right? But if someone is using right reason, they can come to know these philosophical truths, which is really awesome. And Thomas Aquinas says that the philosophical truths are preambles of faith, which means that they're those things that walk before faith and should lead us to faith. So, for example, if there is a God and I have a soul, then what do I do about it? Right? So I have a soul and there's a God. I've reasoned to those things. Now theology would guide me to what do I do about it? Right? And so, yeah, I think it's important that we understand that capacity of using our reason. Because when we are having conversations with people, when we're looking at our faith, it's not just something that God says, believe this, it doesn't make any sense, there's no proof for it, right? Like, he gives us the ability to reason and know those things, and it makes sense. It's logical to believe in God, right? And so, so the way that Thomas Aquinas really talks about that we come to know things is through our 5 senses, right? We have a body, so we can come to know a lot of things through our 5 senses. And I'm going to just talk briefly about what he holds as, actually, let me take this picture off. He holds as the 4 causes for things. And I'm sure some of you have maybe heard of these before. I'm not the most versed in them and know the depths of them, so, continue to study on your own. But the four causes are formal cause, material cause, efficient cause, and final cause. And when he says the cause, St. Thomas Aquinas means the reason for something. So the formal cause is the formal reason for something. So if I'm going to make a table, right, the formal cause, the initial reason for something is the idea. Oh, I'm going to build a table. The material cause is what it's built out of. So it would be wood. I'm building a wood table. Right, so what is the material reason? The efficient cause is the agent. So it's the agent, the person who's doing, or the thing that's doing that. So in this case, it would be myself. And then the final cause is the purpose for something. I want to eat dinner tonight on the table instead of the floor. Right? So that would be the example of that. And it's important for understanding the 4 causes because that's how Thomas Aquinas understands human knowledge, right? When we know things, and even in cases like the sacraments, right? Baptism, for example, we use these 4 causes. The formal cause, right? The idea of baptism is the words, "I baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit." The material cause is the water. The efficient cause, the agent, is the minister of the sacrament, intending to do what the church does. And the final cause is to confer grace, so as to make a sinner into a Christian. Right? So we see these things kind of riddled throughout our faith and throughout reason, but not really always necessarily like understanding the depths of them. And so, yeah, so it's really seeing how things work and impact each other in that capacity. And we'll kind of dive a little bit, come back to this topic when we talk about virtue towards the end. But I just want to throw that out there because it's important to understand when we're talking about God and creation and everything, there has to be an idea, there has to be material things, there has to be an agent, someone who's doing that, and there has to be a purpose to it. And so that's really important when we talk about understanding God from reason alone. And so the question really then for kind of philosophy, like, does God exist? Like just simply not who's God, not what is God, not what is God's plan for my life. Like we can't know those things just from philosophy or reason, but we can come to ask that question whether he simply exists or not. And so Thomas Aquinas gives this example. He says that the existence of God makes an enormous difference in how we perceive the world and one another. Right? So when we're dealing with people, I mean, imagine someone who doesn't believe in God. Do you think they're going to act the way that you do? Maybe, maybe not. But knowing we know that God exists, and we've dove into theology as well, like it shapes how I live every single day, right? It gives that cause, the efficient cause, the material cause, and the purpose of why I'm living my day. So it really matters because it gives us a worldview and an openness to things that someone who doesn't really believe in God or maybe doesn't know that God exists would have. And in a day and age where atheism and agnosticism, where people are just like, oh, I don't know whether God exists or not, this is a really prevalent question, I think, that we haven't really had to face for a lot of people either. I don't think agnosticism has really been something that's been as prevalent as it is today. People just saying, I don't identify with the faith. Right? So being able to use reason to have conversations with them is really important. And Thomas Aquinas believes that the existence of God is not self-evident. So he does not think that God's existence is a known immediately. So not just like born and bam, God's real. One must reason to the conclusion that God exists. And even though it's not self-evident, it can be demonstrated logically. And so by the term self-evident, Thomas Aquinas means something that cannot be possibly denied. So even though he says it's not self-evident, it's not something that can be possibly denied. So 2 + 2 = 4 is self-evident, and no rational person in the history of the world has denied that. Right? However, the same is not true about God. Like you can reason your way along to the conclusion, but people can also fail along that journey to reason that God exists. So it takes some intellectual work, and that's why it's important to have that knowledge and helping others kind of lead to that, have those conversations. So I'm going to just go through the 5 ways real quick. This is Thomas Aquinas' famous 5 ways for demonstrating the existence of God. So the first one is called the argument from motion. So I'm going to just write these down real quick. And this is all in your Summa in 50 pages. So you guys can go over, you guys can go through those and just dive into them a little bit more and understand. But basically, the gist of this one is that since all things are in motion, there must be something that is the first unmoved mover, which is called God, right? What's that?
The Big Banger.
Yeah, exactly, the Big Banger. So if I drop this marker, right, I would be the cause of that. But then, what caused me to drop the marker? I'm wanting to give you guys an example, right? What wanted me to give you guys an example? I'm youth minister here, and I want to help you guys grow as team leaders, right? Where did that come from? Like, I could just continue to go back and back and back, right, until, I was born. My parents were the cause. Like, where did my parents come from? Right? Like, I can just go back and back. Like, it doesn't logically make sense. There's no beginning. Would you guys agree with that? Like, there has to be something to start everything in motion. And right reason tells us that. It's just built into us that doesn't make sense that there can always be an infinite regress back. The second argument is the argument from efficient causes. So we just talked about that word. So argument from efficient causes. Okay, and so this one holds that we perceive a series of efficient causes of things in the world. So the efficient causes were the agent. So we perceive a series of agents or causes of things in the world. So if I push somebody, I would be an efficient cause and agent for that. Nothing exists prior to itself. So before I came into the world, I was not a tangible human being. Right? Like before all of you existed, we didn't exist. And so therefore nothing is the cause of itself. I was the cause of my parents were the cause of their parents, right? We can keep going back and back, there's always a cause for them. So if a previous cause does not exist, neither does the thing that results. So therefore, if the first thing in a series does not exist, nothing in the series exists. So the series of efficient causes cannot extend for infinity in the past, but there would be no things existing now, right? Because there's nothing that would have been. So therefore, it is necessary to admit a first efficient cause to which everyone gives the name of God. So there must be one thing that existed in and of itself before everything else existed. Does that make sense? So that's the second argument. The third is the argument from possibility. See if my handwriting keeps staying well as I go down the board. So this one is to say that we find in nature things that are possible to be and not to be, that come into being and go out of being. That is contingent being. So contingent means something that's dependent upon another thing. So we assume that every being is dependent upon something else. There's nothing that is independent on its own. Everything comes from something else. For each dependent being, there's a time it does not exist. So right, we can say something on Earth, even if it was millions of years ago, there was a point that it wasn't here. So it's dependent upon something else. So therefore, at that time, there would have been nothing to bring the currently existing dependent being into existence. So before it came here, there would have been nothing to bring it into existence. Therefore, nothing would be in existence now, right? If there was not that first thing. So we have reached an absurd result from assuming that every being is a contingent being, because we have things that are contingent, right? Like we're here, clearly. So there must be, so therefore not every being is a contingent being, and therefore some being exists on its own necessity and does not receive its existence from another being, but rather causes them. So this all men speak of as God, right? So that first being who is not dependent on anybody or anything creating it, it is existent in and of itself that creates the rest of existence. The fourth way is argument from degrees of being. So this one, basically like there is a gradation to be found in things. So some things are better, some things are worse than other, right? Noah is better than all of us here, so I'm just kidding. Right, so there's a gradation in things. So predictions of degree require reference to the uttermost case. So a thing is said to be hotter according as it more nearly resembles that which is hottest. So cold water versus boiling water, right? Boiling is closer to the perfection of hottest, so therefore it is said to be more perfectly hot than cold water. Does that make sense? Or, for example, let's just say we use superheroes. So, for example, like if we're saying perfection of superpowers, right? Super speed is better than super strength, right? So for example, right, saying like there's a perfection of the greatest of things. So we have athletes, even athletes, right? Usain Bolt is a better track athlete than I am. So he is a better and more perfect athlete than I am, right? So we have that degree of perfection in things. And so the maximum in any genus or case is the cause of all of that in that genus. So with that, there must be also something that is to all beings the cause of their being, goodness, and every other perfection, and this we call God. There has to be like the perfect being in the greatest of its species, and since God is the greatest of, like there has to be that one thing that is the greatest of all things in order to create what is the perfection of all other things, right? So as we're pursuing goodness, right, there's things, if someone's going and killing people, we know that they're probably not striving for goodness the way that we're striving for goodness, right? But that also means that there has to be an end goal, a perfection of goodness that we're striving towards. Does that make sense? So there's a maximum that we're pursuing, a perfection of things. So if we're talking about beings, like spirit and body, there has to be a maximum perfection that we're like drawn towards. Does that make sense? That was a little bit more confusing, but it's still, when you guys can read through these again, and if they don't make sense, you guys have questions, like please bring these forward. we're gonna pack a lot into tonight. But again, it's reasonable, it makes sense in that case. And then the last one is the argument from design. This marker's kind of running out on me. Okay, so this one, so argument from design. So this is, the greatest example is, it's called the old watchmaker argument. So suppose you're walking in the desert and you come across a golden watch. Would you assume that bits of sand had rubbed together to form gears, crystals, springs, hands, levers, and a wristband all by chance? Like, that's kind of silly. Or would you rather observe the intricate design of the object and assume a designer had crafted it? Like, we would assume that a designer had crafted that. And so the fifth way appeals to the complexities of creation and the design found within it. Like seashells display mathematical proportionality. Like there's not a random chance within that. The tilt of the axis of planet Earth provides an optimal seasonal change for life. The eyeball is an amazingly efficient optical instrument. So nature displays order and design everywhere. Therefore, again, just like we would assume someone made that watch, there must be one who designed the cosmos, and this would be God, right? There has to be one designer. So does that make sense? So those are the 5 ways that that we can reason to the existence of God, which I think is really profound. That through reason alone, we can have conversations with people and say that there's God. Here's proof for it. I don't need to break out, Matthew chapter 12 to say Jesus says I am God, right? Like, especially if someone doesn't believe in the Bible, that's not going to be a very profound argument for them. But being able to listen and understand as leaders, okay, where is this person coming from? What do I need to engage in them with? Like, are they using their reason? If not, then we can start from that place. Or if they are, then we can begin to use these conversations just to find a common ground and then continue to progress from there. So the other thing that I think is really interesting that Thomas Aquinas talks about, and this is really important if you guys are like looking at apologetics and having conversations, is what about atheists? Right? I think this is really interesting that, and he says if one were to present these 5 ways for demonstrating the existence of God to an atheist, would he be convinced? Perhaps not. Thomas says that the atheist is not a logical man because he refuses to acknowledge what is demonstrable. But he goes on to say that the atheist denies the existence of God for moral reasons, not for philosophical reasons. Which I think is really important to understand, right? Most atheists are not going to disprove God because of a philosophical reason, right? If you share the 5 reasons with them, again, they probably more than likely will not be convinced, because it's moral reason that has hardened their hearts towards the fact that God exists. And so I think it's important that, like a lot of these questions are, why children sold through human trafficking for prostitution? Why does God allow hurricanes to destroy the innocent? Why do babies die? Right, and so the atheist attack requires a theological answer that includes a doctrine of free will, original sin, and divine providence. So it's by really diving into our faith in the church itself, right? Because the church is the truth of God poured out into us, into the magisterium of the church, through Scripture, through the saints, through the Holy Spirit, right? And so at the end of the day, and I think this is really important about the church, is even though it's filled with a bunch of sinners, what the church teaches is either all right or it's not at all. You can't have some middle ground that says, oh, I believe that priests can only be men and, the Eucharist is Jesus, but I don't believe that I should save sex for marriage, or I don't believe that, abortion is a wrong, right? Like, the church teaches all those things, so you can't just say the church is right in some of them and she's wrong in some of them, right? It's either all or nothing. And I think that's what's really beautiful about our church, is that when I'm faced with something that I'm not sure about, God has given us a ground and an answer to that question. And now, of course, like, do I struggle knowing that the Eucharist is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ? Absolutely. Like, that's a hard teaching, or it's hard to comprehend. But it doesn't mean that it's not true just because I don't have the full reality of it. Or let's say I don't believe I should save sex for marriage. Like, if just because I disagree with that doesn't mean that the church is wrong on that. It means where am I disagreeing? Is it an aspect of selfishness that I really just want to engage in that pleasure, or do I just have a misguided sense of love? Right? So it's important that as we grow as leaders, that we understand and really pray through those aspects of the church and the teaching of the church, because when we live out that truth, and this is, again, all the saints, when they, you don't base a teacher off of the students that have failed because they haven't applied themselves, right? You base yourself off of the students who've succeeded, who've applied themselves and listened to the teacher, right? And so same thing, you can't grade the church on the people who haven't lived it out. You can grade it on those who have authentically lived it out in every way, and that's the saints, those people who are in heaven, who even atheists would say those are great people, right? That's how you base it. And those are people who lived the fullness of the church and trusted the church and all those things, right? And so just my encouragement in that, just kind of this section on the moral arguments of diving into the teachings of the church, it's important. And I'm going to go on just a quick little side tangent, because I think one that is really important is, and we didn't go to the session on this at Steubenville, but it was the doctrine of heaven, purgatory, and hell, right? We have a lot of people in this world, especially Catholics, who don't believe the doctrine of hell. And this is the teaching of the church. Now, I'm not going to get into the mercy of God, because I'm not going to assume into that, but we have hope in God's mercy. But the teaching of the church is that those who die in a state of mortal sin go to hell, right? And it's not because God's sending them there, but it's their own free will decision that I've rejected God. Now, that's a tough teaching, right? Especially when I'm living in mortal sin, right? That's a hard teaching. But what's beautiful about it, and the beauty of the church behind it, is let's say your sibling is the one who's living in mortal sin. And you just say, oh, hell's kind of a thing, but God's going to bring him to heaven anyways. How hard are you going to pray for your sibling? Probably not very hard, right? I'm not going to really do a lot to help impact her soul or his soul. But if all of a sudden this doctrine of hell is real, and I know that they're living in a state of mortal sin, how hard am I going to pray for the grace for their conversion? Right? Like, it becomes real. It becomes a battle. And I think that's the beauty of the church, is like this, what she teaches, even if it's a hard thing sometimes, there's a reason that is true, right? Because we want this person to freely and on their own volition choose to come to know, love, and serve God. But if they're not doing that, right, like they're not living the life that God has called them to, and ultimately for all eternity, like, they're making a choice where they're going to end up. And so I think it's important that I think that's a really important teaching, and understanding that the teachings of the church are there for a reason, for our own good, and to help us live out truth and charity. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Can I hold it till the end?
Yeah.
You want to write it down for me? Cool, thanks. So that's a total side tangent, but I think that's really important that we understand just the teachings of the church. And some of them are hard, and some of them people aren't going to listen to. If I tell one of my siblings that, it's probably going to tick them off, right? Because no one wants to be corrected in those ways, and it takes humility too. But I'm ultimately, as leaders, like, we're not responsible for how someone responds. We're responsible for sharing the truth. I think that's really important to know. I've had conversations with one of my siblings, and at the end of it, I invited him to pray. He just spoke truth with them, and he was like, "No, I'm good," right? And at the end of the day, I know that I did what I could. I can't, out of my own choice, like, change his free will, right? And so that's what's really important, is like, we need to know and live the truth and share it with others, and that's what we can do, right? We can't force anyone. God doesn't force anyone. As we become like God, like, we don't want to, like, we can't force anyone with that. So so there's that component, the 5 ways, 5 arguments. As we continue to talk about God and knowing God through reason, Thomas Aquinas says that the greatest way that we have to understand God is through what we call analogy of being. Like, because God is so far and high above us, like, when I say God is love, like, I can't, like, that's an understatement. And some people will be like, oh, well, like, you don't know what love is, how can you say that God is love, right? Like, we have a human understanding of what love is. And so when we say that we can know God by analogy, or the other way we can know is by negation, right? Like, I can say God is not a human being, right? Like Jesus Christ, like the Trinity, again, is a revealed divine truth. Reason alone, just philosophy, like, I know that God is not a person, right? The creator of the universe, like, that is not a human being. I can say that, right? That makes sense. That's negation. He's not a dog, right? I can say that. And so through negation, we can come to understand what God is, but also through analogy. And so if I say, like the Psalm, right, like God is my rock, clearly I don't mean literally he's a rock, right? But it's an analogy saying, like, he is strong, he is like what a rock would be, those characteristics, those principles. So we can come to understand God through analogy. And Thomas Aquinas gives us what is the 8 attributes? Yeah, the 8 attributes of God. And again, like, since our knowledge of God is impossible, right? Like, even our reason is a gift from God to come to know Him, which I think is important too. But Thomas lists 8 general attributes of God that can be known from reason by way of negation. So I'm just going to zip through these real quick for time. Again, this is in the packet that I gave you guys, so take some time to go back through this just to get a little bit more information. But does God have parts? He does not have parts because he is not created. You cannot speak of part of God or even half of God. He is what you would say is the most simple of beings, right? He doesn't have parts. And the words simplex, so he's in Latin, the fancy word for not having parts is simplex. So the word derives from a combination of sine, which means without, and plex, which means fold. So he's without folds. And so he's a simple being. Does God have the potential to improve? Like, no, he cannot, because he's fully actualized. If you could possibly run faster than you are currently running, then you're not running perfectly. So the question is whether God is fully actualized, or whether he has potential to be even better than he is. And according to the 4th and 5th argument that we gave for the existence of God, like, he is most fully actualized, right? The degrees of beings, like, he's the most perfect being. And then the third way is of possibility, like, there can't possibly be anything greater or better. Is there anything more desirable than God, right? So this even gets at, is God good? How do we know that God's good? Like, we naturally desire things that are good for us, even if they're misconstrued in bad ways, like sin or something like that. Like, we desire good. So a good is something desired. And is there anything more desirable than God, the first cause and final goal of the entire universe, right? Is the candy bar more desirable? No. Is the car more desirable? No. Isn't even an angel more desirable? No, like, God is greater than all these things, so he is the greatest good, right? So as we're pursuing the good life, it means that we want to pursue God and who he reveals himself through theology as. The 4th one, is God limited in any way? The 2nd way defines God, right? The efficient cause, argument from efficient cause, as the first cause of all things. So as such, God is not limited by time, space, or any other form of finitude. Is God limited by location? Argument from motion, right? We know that God is the unmoved mover. Since God does not move, he is not here or then later there. He is not moved from location to location. He is present always and everywhere, so he is omnipresent. Does God change? God does not change. Change is related to motion, and God is the unmoved mover. And so change also entails a lack of perfection. So if God changed, he would either become a better or worse. However, we saw in the question about God's perfection, God has no potential to become better. He is already best. He is immutable. Can God be measured by time? Thomas defines eternal as something not measurable by time. So now time is intimately related to change. It's go hand in hand. So Thomas assumes the eternity of God naturally follows from God as unchangeable. It is also obvious if God is the unmoved mover, he is not in the chain of events flowing through time, therefore God is eternal. And then the last one, can God be more than one? God cannot be more than one God. Thomas sums up with a 1-2 punch based on God's simplicity and infinity. Since God is without parts, he cannot be divided. Moreover, he is unbounded, infinite. It follows then there can only be one God. There can only be one unmoved mover and only one first cause. There cannot be multiple first causes, so therefore God is one. Does that make sense? So pretty reasonable arguments for understanding different aspects of God. And who knows, these might be things that come up in conversation with people. They might be things that don't, but just for our own sake to know, because I was listening to a homily today from a priest, and he was saying that knowledge and love go hand in hand. The more we know something or about someone, the more we love them. Vice versa, the more we love someone, the more knowledge we desire and seek about that person, right? And so even our own knowledge, this might be something that helps lead someone towards God in any case, which is cool. So I'm going to finish there. I want you guys, I'll get the pages in a second, for reading so page 15 is where all of this starts. It's under Does God Exist? So you guys can reread that and just go back through these to get some more understanding. And then I also would like you guys to read the end part about virtue and humans. So it starts on page 32. And then we'll go over this a little bit next week, just talking about human nature, the intellectual and passions. Because it's important as we work with others. Yeah, just saying. How to do that. So that's your guys' homework per se. Is page 32 to 39 through temperance. Cool. All right, Jeremy, what's your question?
Could you repeat all those